Today we're going to be talking about my labor and childbirth. What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. As promised, today we're going to be talking about my labor and childbirth story. I've been telling people that I was in labor for 33 hours. I recently redid the math on that, specifically for this video, and I actually realized that I was in labor for 43 hours. So where I got 33, I honestly have no idea. But when people talk about how long they were in labor for, they're usually talking about when their contractions start up until they give birth. So Nolan's due date was October 16th, and let me tell you, oh my god, was he so precise. He was ready to come out. So the night of October 15th, we had agreed to babysit a friend of ours kid. She was about 2 months old. We decided to babysit her. We brought her home. Because honestly, I didn't think that I was going to go into labor. I didn't have any signs or anything like that. Around 10 p.m. that same night, I went to use the bathroom, and then as I was standing up, I noticed like this red, white kind of mucusy stuff in the toilet. So of course I whipped out my phone, went onto WebMD like, oh my god, what is wrong with me? Found out that it was my mucus plug that had discharged. It covers the opening of your uterus. So once your mucus plug falls out, that kind of gives you an idea that you're gonna be going into labor soon, but it doesn't really give you a huge estimate. It could be a day, it could be a week. So of course I'm freaking out, like, am I gonna go into labor? Oh my goodness. But a couple, an hour or so passed, no other signs, so I didn't really worry about it. And then about 12 a.m. of the 16th, this is why I said he was super precise, because right around that time, I started getting contractions, but I never had any Braxton Hicks contractions or false contractions or anything like that, so I didn't really know what was happening. So contractions really just feel like really bad period cramps, or to me anyways, that's what it felt like. But sometimes depending on what you eat, your stomach does react a little differently. Especially, I love spicy food. I loved it when I was pregnant. So I thought that's maybe what was going on. So I took an acetaminophen and then we went to bed. Every 20 minutes I did end up getting up to try and use the bathroom to relieve myself, thinking that it would kind of help my stomach pains. But it didn't. And then eventually I did start to think, hey, maybe I'm going into labor. So I started to time my contractions. When I timed my contractions, they weren't very evenly spaced. They weren't getting any more intense. So I decided maybe, I was just having Braxton Hicks contractions. About 4 a.m., Andrew got a call from his uncle asking him if he wanted to go on an early morning fishing trip. Of course, he loves fishing, so he couldn't say no, even though it was like, hey, I might be going into labor, because around 4 a.m. my contractions did end up getting more intense. He was like, oh, you'll be fine. Like, I'll be gone a couple hours. Don't worry about it. Now, keep in mind, we were babysitting. She was so good. I was so happy. She ended up sleeping forever. She slept from 9 p.m. the night prior up until 10 a.m. the next morning. Anyways, so from about 5 in the morning to 8:30, my contractions did start getting more intense. So I started to time them, but they were still very random. They would last 3 to 4 minutes and then disappear for like a minute, come back for 5 minutes, disappear for 5 minutes. The intensity was all the same, but the timing of it was really off. So about 9:30, I decided I would call Andrew, and I was like, hey, I think we need to go to the hospital right now. Like, I need to figure out what's going on, whether I'm having Braxton Hicks contractions, whether I'm dilating. Like, I need to know what's going on. And of course, at 10 o'clock, a friend's daughter ends up waking up. I crawled onto the living room, made her a bottle, and we had her in this little swing. And I thought she would do better being fed in the swing than getting picked up and, having me try to curl up in a ball and feed her at the same time. So I had her in the swing, propped her head up on a little cloth, and then held the bottle while she was laying in the swing. And then while she was laying in the swing, I was like down on all fours, like a ball, just because it was so painful. And then she actually ended up falling asleep right after her bottle. 10:30 comes around, Andrew's still not home, so I'm like, hey, where are you? Of course, he's saying, oh, I'm on my way home. 11 o'clock, I'm on my way home. He finally gets home about 11:30, and thank goodness our roommates got home right about the same time, so we ended up leaving our friend's daughter with them, and we went to the hospital. On our way to the hospital, we ended up stopping at the gas station. He's like, hey, do you want anything? Do you want anything? Like he usually does. I'm like, no, just go get whatever you need to get. I needed to go to the hospital. Like, you need to hurry up right now. And obviously I was way more intense than that. So I got to the hospital. Thankfully, St. John's Hospital has a very simple, straightforward admittance for pregnant women. So we went in, got admitted, they took my blood pressure, they ended up putting an IV on me, which sucked because having to poke me 3 times, just because my veins were jumping. I don't really know what that term means, but yeah, so that sucked. And then they did check for dilation, and I was only dilated to a 2. Generally, they don't admit you until you are dilated to a 5 or a 6, depending on the doctor and the hospital, and your contractions and stuff like that. They did check my heart rate, and they checked his heart rate, and it actually ended up dipping very low while I was there. So they did end up keeping me there. The funniest thing, during my whole stay there, I have the TV on the background because it makes me more comfortable, just to kind of have background noise. There was a Harry Potter marathon that was going on. So I know Harry Potter was playing the whole time, but honestly, I don't really remember what was going on. I've never seen a whole Harry Potter episode, and I know I was watching it the whole time, but I don't remember much. So they kept me at the hospital all day. Not anything eventful really happened. They just wanted to monitor Nolan's heart rate just to make sure that he was doing okay, nothing was going wrong. So I don't really remember how this worked, but they ended up strapping something around your stomach in order to be able to hear and read and do all of that with his heart rate. At this point, it was 9:30 and I still wasn't dilated very much. I think I maybe went to 2.5, maybe a 3, but my contractions still were very intense. They were labor contractions. My contractions are really different from what they're generally supposed to be. So generally your contractions are supposed to be evenly spaced, and then they're supposed to get closer together as you approach delivery. But my contractions, they were back to back, they were very close, and then they would space out for a little while, and then they would come back and get very, they were just very intense, very different from what I expected. So I think that was the worst part. But during the nights, they did hurt a little bit more, especially because I was enduring it for so long, from midnight the day before. So in the middle of the night, I didn't want to get an epidural because I couldn't stand the thought of having a needle go up my back. I just couldn't think about it. So I asked for nitrous gas. And what it is, it's really just a gas mask, and you put it on and it's supposed to help you breathe, and obviously it's gas. Honestly, I didn't think it did a whole lot. It just helped me focus on breathing, but other than that, it didn't really have any other effects on me. So I couldn't sleep at all that night. My contractions were so intense. So I ended up waking up the next morning at 5:30, and keep in mind, I have already been in labor for about 30 hours. I'm like, okay, you know what? I haven't slept for a full hour in 30 hours. My contractions are so intense, like I need this epidural. I think that if my labor wasn't that long, I wouldn't have taken it in the first place, but I did end up asking for epidural. The worst part about getting the epidural, just like with the IV, is they ended up having to poke me 3 or 4 times. Quite remember the reason. I want to say jumpy veins again. I remember just holding on to a pillow, and honestly it wasn't that bad, just because I was so tired. I think the worst part was having to sit, because you have to sit up, and then they poke a needle into your back. And the worst part was having to sit like that while my contractions came, because my contractions, like I said, lasted a while. I remember Andrew just kind of looking at me like he felt so much pity for me at that moment. 5:30, 6 in the morning, and I still wasn't really dilated. I think I was only dilated to about a 5. After 30 hours and only being dilated to a 5, it was kind of worrisome for them. I ended up getting something called Pitocin, and it speeds up your labor pretty much. I did get dilated to about a 7 a couple hours after I took the Pitocin. I got the Pitocin in me, and my water hasn't broken yet, so they did end up being my water. And at this point, I am super out of it. I haven't slept in almost 2 days. I've got drugs in me, but this is all I remember. I did have a catheter in me, restroom without having to get up. Though I would recommend, if your water hasn't broken yet and they let you, I would recommend to take a bath, because it does help a lot with the contractions. And the nurse was nice enough to allow me to take a bath. 3:30, 4 o'clock, I was like, okay, you're dilated enough, we're gonna start pushing. My doctor arrived. Honestly, I don't remember a whole lot in the 4 hours that it took me. I started at about 4 or something, and he finally came out about 7:30, 7:45. The things I do remember from actually pushing him out was that you're supposed to push with your contractions. Being that I was an epidural, it was kind of hard for me to know when my contractions were coming, because it kind of numbs everything. When I got my epidural, like all my legs were, you know, you couldn't feel your legs anymore. You couldn't really feel anything on your bottom half. You just kind of feel numb. But by the time I started pushing, because I had already taken my epidural, you know, almost 12 hours before, the epidural was slowly wearing off. So I could still feel my contractions, but they weren't as strong to the point I knew when to push with them. But I did take really long breaks in between my pushing, I think. So I would fall asleep, wake up, slightly feeling contractions, push again, wake up, push again. I also do remember that so there's like, I think there's a couple of nurses in there. Andrew was in there, and then my doctor was obviously in there. And I do remember, because we were in there for so long, there was a cops marathon going on. And like I said, I like having the TV on because it's comforting to me. So they were watching cops as I was, you know, napping or whatever in between pushing. And I do remember them laughing and kind of talking about it. It's definitely something that I will always remember, because I just personally think it's hilarious. And I do remember also getting very upset because the whole time they told me, oh, you're almost there, you're almost there. And then I would push 5, 6, 7 more times and nothing would happen. And so they kept telling me that, and I kept feeling upset because I felt like they were lying to me, because it took me 4 hours and they kept telling me that it was almost there. But the final push, I didn't even realize that he was actually slipping out until what I felt was this huge gush of water. And then obviously everybody's rushing to go and do this and that. They put him on my chest after they wiped him down and everything. And I was like, oh my God, I couldn't even like completely enjoy him, unfortunately, because I was so exhausted from all the labor and all the pushing and stuff like that. But I guess that's what I get, because I did have a really easy pregnancy. I didn't have any morning sickness. All I really had was fatigue. All other things that I do remember during my pushing was crying. They're like, oh, you know, his head is crying. Do you want to touch it? Do you want to see it? You know, they have a mirror ready and everything. And honestly, I was kind of freaked out. I didn't even want to watch any labor stories or videos before I gave birth. I was like, no, it's okay. Like, I'll just, I know it's fine. Like, I'll just see him when he comes out. After I pushed him out, I want to say about 30 minutes to an hour after I did need to use the bathroom. They took the catheter and everything out, and the nurse asked me whether I needed help getting up. The epidural, you know, it makes it hard to walk because you don't really have the strength in your legs. But by the time I pushed, I'm pretty sure that all my epidural already wore off. So I want to say that I did kind of do a natural childbirth as he was getting pushed out, but honestly, like I said, all the details are really blurry between those 4 hours. So that is my labor story. Honestly, it's still a shock to me after thinking about it that I was in labor for 43 hours, but that's what happens. So if you guys have any questions at all, feel free to ask. I would love to hear your labor stories, your questions, any experiences you guys have had. So please feel free to post them down below or personally message me. We'll see you guys next week for my next video.